Hey there, Nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back with another episode of Way of the Underhive. This is a series that is dedicated to brand new players to Necromunda, and it's going to help you guys to pick out your gangs, some pros and cons of each of the different gangs, as well as their gang compositions. And now we're actually doing a series on different alliances that are available for your gang throughout your campaign. So we're starting with the Merchant Guilds first, and this episode is dedicated to the Slave Guild, also known as Mercator Sanguis. So we'll be talking about these guys real quick. We'll be talking about their positive and negative impact on your campaign play. We'll also talk about the tactical and strategic assets that the Slave Guild also brings, as well as their benefits, drawbacks. We'll also talk about the Slaver Entourage and the individual fighters that make up that group. And finally, we'll give you our final overall conclusion of making an alliance with the Slave Guild. So that being said, let's get this video on a roll. So the first thing we're talking about real quick is the positive impact of campaign play mechanics when you make an alliance with one of the merchant guilds. Now, one of the nice rules about this is they have a special rule called a band apart, which gives you all the benefits and none of the negatives of taking these extra fighters into your gang alliance. All the benefits mean you get the additional fighters that you can use in your different scenarios, and if of course these guys get taken out of action, it doesn't impact your gang too negatively. At the same time, the bodyguards for each of the different entourages that these guild alliances make are really good fighters and pretty good at getting things done. So it's a nice way to really balance out the numbers that you might have for a scenario, because these additional fighters don't take up any crew slots, so you can bring more fighters to a scenario potentially. And at the same time, bringing experienced fighters with better equipment without impact your crews is always a good thing. So now that we're done talking about the positive impact that a guild alliance will have in your campaign play, let's talk about the negative impacts. First of all, you cannot be an outlaw and ally yourselves with a guild, so that is a huge problem right there off the bat. So if your gang does get an outlaw status, you can't make any guild alliances, or if you play an outlaw gang like Corpse Grinder Cults, for example, it's going to be kind of difficult for you to make a guild alliance. Now, there is a flip side to that. You may not be able to take guild alliances, but you can still take noble house alliances, and you could also take criminal alliances. And we'll be talking about those different alliance systems later on during the series as well, so don't lose heart if you become an outlaw. Another problem, of course, is that if you do make an alliance with one of the merchant guilds, you do have to worry about things like guard duty, tithes, as well as drawbacks. Guard duties are types of game mechanic that kind of limits the type of scenarios you can play. At the same time, tithes can also cut into your resources, and finally the drawbacks could have some serious implication for your gang. So let's go on and talk about what kind of assets the Slave Guild actually brings to you. Now we're going to divide up between two types of assets. We have what I like to call tactical assets as well as strategic assets. Tactical assets are game mechanics that affect either individuals in your gang or combat on the actual tabletop. So these are ways that will be affecting your actual tabletop game as you go through your campaign. While strategic assets are more like game mechanics that impact a gang over the course of a campaign. So things are going to help you in terms of the long term, also in the pre and the post game section of a campaign. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So first of all, when it comes to the Slave Guild, they make an excellent tactical asset. And the reason why is because the fighters it provides with its entourage on the battlefield. The Slaver Entourage is a very hard-hitting, close combat-oriented group, and they can really help you out on the battlefield in your individual games. In fact, I would actually say that the Slave Guild, in terms of tactical advantage anyways, is a number one high-tier pick because of the fighters they give you on the battlefield. Now, there is a flip side to that. On the opposite of that, they make a very poor strategic asset for your gang, and the reason why they're not very good over the long term in a campaign is because of the limited role it has in actually helping out players with your campaign mechanics. There's not really anything really impressive about it. So if you are taking the Slave Guild, you're taking these guys purely for their tactical assets. So now that we're done talking about the Slave Guild overall, let's go and talk about the benefits and the drawbacks. So one of the benefits we have, of course, is called weapons training. It's either your leader or one of your champions typically learns one primary skill of their choice for the upcoming battle. And once that battle is over, they lose that skill. So this could be extremely useful, especially on the battlefield. This is what makes the Slave Guild such a great tactical asset, because you could actually bring that into the actual game. So for example, let's say you have a leader, and let's say you take Overseer or some other combat skill for your leader, and you're wanting to use like Commanding Presence, for example. You can automatically use that if you want to for larger group activations. So like I said, very, very tactical choice, very, very good for that. Another benefit they have, of course, is what's called a promising fighter, and what ends up happening is you randomly choose a fighter who took someone out of action either in close combat or using a coup de grace, and you roll d6. On a 1, that they are enslaved by the guild and their leader from the roster forever. So that's kind of a negative. But if you roll a 6, however, you earn D3 times 10 additional credits because they're actually impressed with the way your fighters are working out. And of course, everything between 2 to 5, nothing happens. So there is kind of a drawback to the Promising Fighter, but at the same time though, if you plan on taking out enemies in close combat or using coup de grace, this can help you generate some income as well, so it's kind of nice. And of course, the very last bit of it they add, of course, is the Slaver Entourage, but we will talk about those guys here in a little bit more detail here in a second. So the main drawback that you have with the Slave Guild is that you have slaves for the pit special rule. And basically you can't keep any enemy fighters. And that's basically how it works. And pretty much how it works, that those captured fighters you capture, they automatically go to the Slave Guild. And of course you could deny them doing this, but if you do that, though, you test the alliance. And that's one of the problems that you have. Okay, so if you're one of those kind of fighters who like taking captives from your enemies because you like to generate income that way, that's not going to happen real well for you guys. So taking things like bounty hunters, for example, is not going to do any good if you have an alliance with the Slave Guild. So keep that in mind. However, in all fairness, though, it could be a potentially serious drawback, but for most cases, though, it's not really going to be much of a big deal. So, you know, kind of a minimal drawback for the benefit that you get. So first of all, let's go ahead and talk about the Slaver Entourage. Now, the Slaver Entourage is probably one of the strongest, toughest, hard-hitting guild entourage that you can actually get. They're kitted out and designed for close quarters combat, pure and simple. And so just like the corpse grinders that you can get from the Corpse Guild, they're a really good way to ground out a shooting gang, such as a Vanstar gang or a Delac gang. Shooting gangs, usually like Vanstar and Delac, really struggle with close combat. Or if you're really good at close combat, like you're playing like Goliath, for example, you could really just steamroll your opponents by getting additional fighters to help you guys out. So because of that, the Slaver Entourage is probably the best of the entourage that you can take. So with that being said, let's go and talk about the individual fighters that make up this group. Alright, first of all, you have the Chain Lord. The Chain Lord is basically the leader of your little warband for your guys' Slaver Entourage. He's what's called a Guild Procurator, is what he's called. And let's talk about his stats real quick. So he's got a 4-inch movement as well as weapon skill 3. Like I said, really good in close combat. Ballistic skill 6, so not so great. But he's got strength and toughness of 4 apiece. He's got 2 wounds, 4+ initiative, 2 attacks. He's got 7 leadership, 6 cool, 7 willpower, as well as 9 intelligence. So this guy is not exactly the most highly cerebral thinking, good shooting type of lord, okay? So let's go and talk about his weapons. So you basically, when you get the Chain Lord, you have one of two options. You can either take a Chain Glaive for your Chain Lord, or equip them with a Chain Axe and a Shock Whip. Traditionally, you want to go the Chain Axe and Shock Whip combo because you get the versatile attacks plus an additional attack in close combat. He's also packing light carapace armor, so he's got good armor saves. He's also got a Bio Booster and a Stum Slug Stash for additional durability as well as buffs in close combat. And this guy also comes with both the Overseer as well as a Hurl skill. Now, before, when we talked about all the other different guild entourages you'd have, you'd often want to use that character, the Guild Procurator, to basically use the Overseer ability to spam that for their bodyguards and for their fighters. Oddly enough, that's not what you want to do with the Chain Lord. The Chain Lord is a beast in close combat, so you want to get this guy stuck in and slicing people up left and right. So this is actually probably like the first of the Guild Alliance guys you don't want to use Overseer with too much, because while it might be good for other fighters, it's just too much for the double action penalty, especially how good the Chain Lord really is as well. So that's something that's kind of interesting about this guy. So up next, we have what's called the Guild Factotum, and this guy is called the Shackle Man. So let's go and talk about him real quick. So for his stats, he's got a movement characteristic of 4 inches. He's got a 4-up weapon skill, 5-up ballistic skill. He's got 3 strength, 3 toughness, 2 wounds. He's also got a 4 initiative, 1 attack. He's got 8 leadership, 7 cool, 7 willpower, as well as 8 intelligence. Now, when it comes to the equipment, the Shackle Man is actually armed with a cult icon for larger group activations. He's also got a shock stave. He's also got flak armor, as well as a harpoon launcher as well. Oddly enough, like I said before, when it comes to the other guilds, usually the guild factotum is actually not that great. The Procurator is pretty good because of the Overseer skill, but this is the first in the entourage where everyone is a good fighter, and you can use them exactly that. The Shackle Man actually makes a pretty decent heavy weapons support character. Also really deadly and pretty good in close combat too, so you can pretty much do things both equally well. Just make sure that you get within short range with that harpoon launcher so that we get the +1 to hit when you open fire with it. So it's kind of weird. So like traditionally you want to use this character, these rank of characters, to usually be bodyguards for your leader or for your more valuable bodyguard fighters. Oddly enough, you could actually send this guy to do most of the fighting himself as well, which is actually kind of cool. And lastly, we have our 2 pit fighters in this entourage as well. So your pit fighter bodyguards, they have 2 of them. They have movement characteristics of 5 inches, 4+ weapon skill, 6+ explosive skill. They have 3 strength and toughness. They also have 1 wound and 4+ for initiative. They have 2 attacks, 8 leadership, 7 cool, 8 willpower, as well as 10 intelligence. Now these guys are actually armed with chain glaives, so they're really good in close combat with some hard-hitting attacks. They have flak armor for some durability, as well as stim slug stash as well. Now these guys are devastating up-close fighters, and the reason why is because they automatically come with the rain of blow skills, which means that combat for them is a simple action, which means you can do double the combats in close combat, especially with their chain glaives. So it's really, really nice. And the nice thing about that is that you could actually, when you use the overseer ability from the chain lord on one of your pit fighters, that means this guy could potentially make up to 4 separate attacks, which can make this guy just a whirling dervish of destruction. But like I said before, your chain lord and your Shackle Man are actually really good too, so using that overseer ability is not going to be too much of a problem for you, because you could actually use your leader, your chain lord, to actually just do some fighting and that kind of stuff. So that's actually one of the cool things about that. So like I said before, this is a very hard-hitting basically little entourage they send you for close combat. So in conclusion, when it comes to your guys' alliances with the Slave Guild, it's actually a very excellent top tier, close combat oriented alliance with very minimal drawback. In fact, it actually ties at the first place with being the most useful guild alliance right next to the Corpse Guild. Usually what you're trying to looking at the difference with the two of them is, are you just looking for pure killing power? Then you want to take on the Slave Guild. If you want killing power, a little bit weaker killing power, but the ability to heal up your fighters, the Corpse Guilds. They basically kind of tie for first place in this sense, and so because of that, they're really, really good. So you really can't go wrong with the alliance of the Slavers Guild as well. Not to mention the Forge Rule miniatures. While I am a cheapskate and I don't see the point of actually shelling out large amounts of money for miniatures like that, I do see the appeal. The miniatures for the Slavers Entourage is actually quite ace looking. I think they really capture the look of what these guys represent for their guild, so I think it's kind of neat. So I will give them that too, because the miniatures are pretty cool. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this one. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is valuable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest, greatest hobby news related to our channel. That's good for you guys. We'll catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.